Gangshar Tene ta tanong hadugi chunting control le tanda ta cerdo lende la luayo mare ta cerdo ngaranso rangin suyina ya deji dang tempa gugi ore dungal tong trawa gugi ore la tene deji de kandisi ne top tugi ore se na tene gewa sopala tene top tugi ya ba jai da dungal tong tal to ba ji yungi ore la te karisi ne tal to ba yungi se na tene dipa gewa pangbala tene dungal te na tal tugi ore la tene junsin teacher na di lende la loa yo mare la tene ta teacher na ngaranso dewa topa tong dungal tong talwe ki chertu tene gewa te lot len tugi yore dungal dikpa gewa te deji te gugi yore la deji te top tugi rwe se na top tugi yore te kandi se ne top tugi yore se na gewa sabala tene dewa te top tugi yore 대전도 동할때 빵국이 와래라 동할때 빵 투그레베세나 동할때 빵 투기 와래 간디시네 빵 투기 와래세나 동할지 조디바메 게와 빵발라테네 빵 투기 와래라 테네 다 티처나 테네 게와데 드룹 디바데 빵국이 와래라 테네 티빵으로 세발라 게디니 롱도로 세발라 게디니 무생구 테네 게와데 간데린도 랑게 냠스 랭구바 단도 롱구베 게와데 간데린도 테네 나랑게 둥할지 조 빵구바 디바 미게와데 간데린도 디니데 야보제 무생구기로레라 땡무 심버세발라 동보 릉어 예서 쪼리 그세 테네 다티 게디 님보테 무 심버세발라 게디 니디 수제기 요아레세나 르ngo 예som 그제기 요아레라 테네테 르ngo 예som테 르디 쪼체긴도가 ngāti zō chēgindō yēdi zō chēgindō zō kāndē chēgindō tē yākbō jē tāgō gārē sō.
To pick up this morning where we left off this morning, it is an unfailing fact that happiness results from virtuous action, and that suffering results from having committed unvirtuous karmic deeds. And so karma is unfailing. And so whoever we are, whether it is ourselves or whether it is anyone else, we all want to be happy. We all need to be free of suffering. Well, how is it that we can be happy? We can be happy if we do virtuous things. And we want to be free of suffering. Well, how is it that we can be free of suffering? Well, to be free of suffering, we need to be free of it. We need to abandon its cause and misdeeds and non-virtue. As a result of abandoning that, we can free ourselves from happening. That is free ourselves from suffering. And so that is why karma is unfailing. And so we need to be happy, we need to be free of suffering, and in order to do that, we need to take up virtue. We need to practice virtue, we need to take up virtue. And if we, we want to be happy. You ask, well, is it possible that we can be happy? It is possible, we can be happy. And the reason is that by doing virtuous things, we can then bring ourselves happiness. Likewise, we need to be free of suffering. We need to give up suffering. And can we actually give up suffering? The answer is yes, we can give up suffering. And in order to give up suffering, we need to give up the cause of suffering. The cause of suffering is misdeeds and non-virtues. And so for that reason, we need to do virtue. We need to accomplish virtue. We need to give up non-virtue. And therefore, in order to do that, you must first recognize what is virtuous and what is evil, or what is a misdeed. And so what is virtue? And when we know what is virtue, then we need to take it up. We need to put it into practice. Similarly, we want to be free of suffering, and in order to be free of suffering, we need to give up its cause, and the cause is misdeeds and non-virtue. And so we need to identify, we need to recognize what is good and what is a misdeed or wrongdoing. And so in order to do this, you must determine which is most important, your body, your speech, or your mind. And so when we are coming to identify misdeeds, or when we are coming to identify virtue, we need to identify who is it who does it. Well, who is it who does them? Well, we do them with our body, speech, and our mind. And of these three, our body, speech, and mind, we need to figure out, well, which one is the most important? Is the body the most important thing? Is our speech and the most important thing, or is our mind is the most important thing? We need to really analyze carefully to see which is the most important.
Tene ta te tabo de du ni ge jote ge di ni pote londro se pala tene jung yo re se la pa kapsala kapka la tena o dipa me ge wan di ge samba ngemba ta joro ngemba se ge yo re te ina yon kola de ji pusam so pa yon to to so ba da bota yang ka he la tene samba sang bota tene te yen do joro je pa sang bo tene gewa hata se na ya tela dipa me ge tala tela ne pa ta jingin tong dunghal mambo yung do samba da bo yung se ge re te ina ya te ngune te ge tene neka ta te kadu la tende yung se ge re ma to ngune ge di ni bo te norne tende yung tugu yo mare la tene zo ge di londro sepa la tene de du ni bo te yung yo re ta te tabo te la yang se ta lunga ye song khandi zo che te gu lunga ye song khandi zo che tawar sepa la 당보 대라야 룽아 예서 몬체 고베 드니티 루데 칸데 린도 나데 칸데 린도 히데 칸데 린도 땡몬체 고베 대야포 제타 지탕게 힐하와레 데나야 살보르 송가바레 루세르와데 펜네제 땡도 줄베 두치지 품본데 예인시 루세르나 칸데라 거기 요와레세나 tene ngaransola kapkala tene chipotan debo yunya pemba yunya kapkala nepatan dunghal don nasala sopa yung juye be ten tu churbe doji sena tati khatan chodon rupa la sopa le trupu pumbondala lu serwa ye ngo serwa te kandel sege yore sena khatho kecha hijin de ye tene pa kapkala pembata dewi kecha yabo hebata kapkala tene nesem ton chichuk go ne kecha dujo hebala soba khatho kecha hijin de ngo ye ta sem serwate kandel sege yore sena sem serwate medin gotin masam gosam sena tene ta jay mambo thinking ndra mandra yapo yang the kapkala dupo yang the kapkala dupo yung sam kapkala yapo yung sam se ta andiga gotin sinking te mambo thinking da bochela ko yo masam gosam sinking te mambo Mangbo Songking de la, Tene Keji Rela, Yang Tutu, Yenaya, Tene Kapka la Lansong Ga, Kapka la Lansong Du, Tene Tatela Tene, Sanjitend, Jura Mombondro, Sanjitend, Jura Mombondro la, Tene Nom Jurmangbo, Tente, Tiga Onke, Tene Samgetendo, God, Sono Mandawata. Sono mandawa mambo tembaton sono mambo tawa latini tini gadu mambo ji pa latini lula yang namjur mandawa ten ngola yang tini kecha mandawa mambo ten te chodong song kin te yen tini kapkala de shot ndapotan kapkala hedang ndapotan tini tigo ni le song kin te la sen segres.
When we are trying to take up, when we are trying to bring ourselves happiness and free ourselves from suffering, and when we take up virtue and give up non-virtue, then at that time we need to think about, or we need to realize what is happening in our mind. We have to realize what is misdeeds and non-virtue. We need to think, sometimes we have bad thoughts, bad intentions, and we have bad activities. And sometimes, even though there may be someone who has all these bad actions and does all these terrible things, they have all sorts of happiness and wealth and all this stuff, and you might wonder where that happens. Or sometimes there might be someone who has good intentions, or who always acts kindly, and they only do virtuous things, but nothing happens to them but bad things. They're only harmed and hurt and experience many problems and difficulties in their life. It's possible that this sort of thing might happen. But you have to realize that this is just the temporary result. This is just a temporary situation. It's not what happens right at the moment that is important. Rather, it is the future result. And so in this way, there's no mistake between virtue and misdeeds. There's no mistaking, you can't make any mistake in that. And so we need to take up the virtue and we need to give up the misdeeds. And so in order to take up the virtue and do that, we first have to recognize what is virtuous and what is evil. And in order to do that, we must decide what is most important, the body, speech, or mind. And in order to do that, we need to decide. To decide this, you must understand what your body, speech, and mind are. So, what is the body? What is the speech? And what is the mind? Of course, this is something that seems very easy. It's something very easy to understand, but here it is very clearly said what they are. And so, here it says the body is your physical body that serves as a support for benefit or harm. So, what is our body? Well, sometimes we feel pleasure, sometimes we feel happiness, and sometimes we're helped in some sort of way. Or sometimes we suffer, sometimes we have pain or illness or various other things. And that which is the support for that is the physical body. And when we talk about physical body, we are talking about this aggregate of our flesh, our blood, and our bones, and all that stuff. It's all aggregated together. And so that is what we mean by our body. By our speech, the speech is the making of sounds and talking. So speech here is... speech here is when we say things that are good, when we say words that are helpful and kind and beneficial and pleasing to people. Or sometimes we will say things that are harsh and nasty and unpleasant to talk about. And so that which says those things, that is our speech. So that is the speech is the making of sounds and talking. The mind. What is it that our mind is? The mind is that which can think of and recollect anything at all, that which feels like or dislike, and every moment shows different expressions of joy or sorrow. so our mind, the thing is, something that can think of or recollect anything at all. And so whatever is many different things that we can think of at any time. Sometimes we think about good things. Sometimes we think about bad things. But we can think about good things, bad things. We can remember good things. We can remember bad things. All of these happen in our mind. It can remember anything at all. It can think of anything at all. And this means it can think of lots of different things. Just absolutely lots of different things that it can think about. And it can think about them in each moment. And so at every moment it shows different expressions of joy and sorrow. So in each different moment we'll think of something nice or think of something bad. And then right then we'll maybe feel happy, or then a moment later we'll feel suffering or sad. And so it really changes all the time. And so because of that, it changes and it shows all these different things. It shows the different expressions of joy and sorrow. Because we see something that we like, we feel joy, or we see something we don't like, we feel unhappy about it. And so then because of doing that, then we'll do something with our body. We'll do something beneficial or harmful with our body, or we'll say something with our mind, and so with our speech. And so we'll have all these different expressions with our body and different things that we say with our mind. And also it will feel like, or it'll feel dislike. It'll feel, and when we talk about like here, actually specifically what we mean is desire. We want things. Or it'll feel aversion, not liking things. And so that is the mind, and that is in that way it is the mind that accumulates karma.
Tene ta tige lungo yi song won che ta ti lu kan de rin do ngo kan de rin do yi kan de rin do ha ko yo la tene le ge di ni kon si chong ta te la kan de se ge yo re se na kap ka la lu ge go ni a ge wa so ge yo re lu ge go ni di pa mi ge wa so ge yo re kap ka la ngo ge go ni ge wa so ge yo re tene ngo go ni mi ge wa so ge yo re tene kap ka la sen ji go ni ge wa so ge yo re tene kap ka la sen ji go ni mi ge wa so ge yo re ta chi tang ge le la number som yo re la le la ge wa tene mi ge wa tene luma tin tin number som yo re la ta che to ge di ni chang ba ge cha ge yo ma re tene kap ka la ge wa yang lu ji go ni ge wa yang so ge yo re kap ka la dipa mi ge wa yang so ge yo re kap ka la ta se ta ge di kan ya ma long do ma tem pa luma tem pa tene ta tinde ya je ge yo re la te yin do ngo le yin na ya sung ka yo re te yin do san le yin na ya sung ka kap ka la ge di kan ya ma yin pa inge som yo tang ge yo re kap ka la ge we som ba che par chin tinde je ge yo re kap ka la me ge we som ba kon hong yen ba tinde je ge yo re la ta te kan ga lu sen lu ngo yi sung ka le yong ge yo re ta te je ge yo re ge di ni ka je ge yo re je ge yo re te yin na yang ran zo ge ta te nen go chen bo te ya bo ji da gu ge yo re la nen go chen bo te ya bo ji da du te la lu ji ge di je pa te kal chen bo ta nen go chen bo rin du ge ya na ngo ge tene keche che pa te la tene ge di ni sa pa te la kal chen bo rin du ga ya na sen je tene ge di ni sa pa te kal che ge do zo che hin de gu se ta ngarang la song to na yong da yen je dong wa thinking tene te lo ma te la tin na yong da te lu zo che ge do ngo zo che ge do lu ngo yi song ge no sen zo che ge do ya bo ta gu ge re de gu ge re te de kap so kahi ge som na lu zo che ser te ngarang chu hob kala te na sem ge te ten ge re de yin na ya ti ge zang bo ji yin na ya sen chong bi ge ji tu ge yo ma re la tene ngemba je yin na yung sem changba ge koran ten kare te tene che thugi yo mare ta ti leka te su che go ge yo re se na lubu ge che go ge yo re ta che mela ne pa charwa la so ba yung lu ge se ge yo re mela pin ta pa ta dungan le cha pa la so ba yung su che ge yo re se lu ge che ge yo re la teacher na kha he ge som na ta lu ngo ye som ge no ne lu de kal che hu rin do som ba yo yang 카히게 somna 다디게 류게 당분이 내가 제가 말해 당부 깨처럼 장봉년 방방보 히 드니 텔라테네 레가텐서 탄릭 레가텐서 탄릭나 레가 야포지 있나야 당부 ngọt 깨쳐 야포지 히네 레가 야포데 탄릭 구기요래라 tene te yendo yana leka dubo je sena yo ngagi kecha tenzo hi ne tene leka te trade gu ge warela teacher na khahi ge som na lu le ngo zo che do samba yo yong sig re
And so we need to, now that we recognize what the body and speech are, here we need to realize what is it that's most important. When you commit an evil action, or a virtuous or evil action, you must ask yourself, what is most important? Is the body the main thing? Is the speech the primary aspect, or is the mind the most important? And so here, sometimes when we do things with our body. When we make actions with our body, sometimes they're virtuous, and sometimes they are not virtuous. They're misdeeds and non-virtuous. Sometimes with our speech, we will say things that are virtuous, and sometimes we will say things that are misdeeds, things that are non-virtuous. And sometimes with our mind, we'll have an intention or a thought, and that thought will be either virtuous or non-virtuous. But actually, when we think about it, karma, there are three different types of karma. If in this way, there are three different types of karma, and these three different types of karma are virtuous, non-virtuous, and neutral. So virtuous, non-virtuous, and neutral. It doesn't necessarily have to be just either virtuous or a misdeed. It's not like that. When you do something with your body, you can do something that is virtuous. You can do something that is non-virtuous, or you can do something that's really not much of anything at all. It's just sort of there. It's just neutral. Or when you have your speech, when you do things with your speech, it's the same way. You have the three options. You can do something, you can say something virtuous, something non-virtuous, or something neutral. And likewise, with our mind, with our thoughts and our motivations, we can have the three different types of motivations. We can either have a virtuous motivation, non-virtuous motivation, or we can be thinking about something that's really not much of either one or the other. And so in that way, sometimes we will be able to have a good virtuous thought, and we'll be able to do an excellent virtue. Or sometimes we'll have a non-virtuous thought, a bad motivation. And so in this way, we have the body, speech, and mind. We have all three of them, and they all do the actions. They all do actions, and they can do either virtues, or they can do non-virtues, or they can do neutral, of course. They can either do virtues or non-virtues, but for us, we need to figure out what is the actual main point. What is the crux of the matter? And so we need to really look at this carefully and see what is the most important. Now, when we are doing something, is it the body that is the crux of the matter? Is the body the most important thing? Or is the speech most important? Is it like when we say virtuous or non-virtuous things with our speech? Is the speech the most important thing? Or is it our minds that is most important when we are thinking about virtues and non-virtues? What is most important? So we must ask ourselves, is the body the main thing, the speech the primary aspect, or is the mind the most important? And some people will reply that it is the body. So some people will say, well, of course the mind thinks of what you have to do. The mind makes a decision about what you have to do, but it doesn't actually do anything. If you think of doing something bad, it's not until you actually do it with your body that you've actually done anything. That's what they say. Or when you think about doing something the mind alone can't do something, can't commit an action. Or similarly, when you think about doing something nasty, and when you think about doing something bad, then the mind alone the mind thinks about it, but the mind can only think about it. It can't actually go ahead and do that non-virtuous thing. For that reason, the mind can't be so important. It's the body that actually does everything, and the body must therefore be the most important. It's the body that causes harm to to other people, other beings. It's with our body that we can help people, and that with our bodies that we can protect people from suffering. So that's what some people say, and so therefore they think that among the body, speech, and mind, that obviously the body is the most important. Now, some people say, well, actually, it's not the body that's most important, because before you're going to do something, you talk about it. You have a conversation about it. First, you have the conversation, you decide what you're going to do, and then you go ahead and make the preparations in doing it. And so because you first talk about it, it's actually the speech that is most important. So first you say some mean things about someone, and you say the mean things, and then you decide to do something bad, and you do something bad. So it's that speech that comes first. So that speech is most important. Or you think that, well, you say something nice about someone, and then you decide to do something nice to help them. And so it's the speech that's much more important than the body, they say.
Tene lale sem zoche serwa yes. Tene lale ge tati lunga ni le sem zoche serwa yebi. Kontarion se tati de song tang yore te la song hip to tona. Lunga ni zoche senkin suyin jong ti je pa ne to ma song yin. Lu zoche wa re senkin da ngā zō chewa re senkin tī ge somlo te yabu ji tang ma to pa re te tsam zō che ge yo ma re ta wo na kāng zō che se na sem zō che te ta tanda kāngā ga no nengo che hyu nrabu te sem la tu ge yo re sem zō che te di jun sen sem ji ma sam na lu ji ge di ni ka si me se 다 디 준신 센조 칠리 준신 가르리세나 드니 디게 당보 다이 레가 야보지 세요나야 드니 수상게 요아레세나 샘게 상게 요아레 샘지 썸니 드니 루지 게와사나야 드니 당보 샘지 공상보 지지 루지 게와데 사게 요아레 드니 대견도 디바 미게와지 룽어게 루지 세나야 데 당보 센지 공홍연바 지지네 드니 루지 디바 미게와데 사게 요아레 마도 샘지 때니 다 공홍상보다 공홍연바데 마종나 드니 루지 게와요 사게 마레라 디바 미게와요 제게 마레 니카시 메시 라 티처나 루단 센니 소조 체그레세나 센조 체그레 대견도 깨체케베가 온도세나 당하고 온도세나 나라야 드니 나단 센니 소조 체그레세나 센조 체그레 당부 다근홍 야부 제제니 깨자상부 제 게웨게 나제 정나 대강을 때는 중국요아레세나 계획을 제버지는 때는 용국요아레 라 대견도 미게웨 되네 깨찰라소바 두고제 단네 네바찰킨다보제 정나야 대간이 중국요아레세나 동보센지 그런 넘버 마다바텔 때네 중국요아레 티처나 나기 깨차 약보히 나얀다 깨차 두보히 나얀다 당보 샘게테니 제테니 테니 티케차 티헤게 요아레 마도 샘게테니 깨차테 샘게테니 테 마데나 티케차테 히미시베 티처나 류레종 센조 체그레라 나레종 센조 체게 요아레
Some will say that it is the mind that is the primary aspect. Some people will say that that the mind is the most important thing. So if we really think about it, if we look at this in detail, in any case, so if we really think about this in detail, whoever claims that the body or speech is most important has not really penetrated to the core with their examination. And so if you are someone who says, oh, the main thing is the body, or if you're someone who says that the main thing is the speech, then you haven't really gotten down to the heart of the matter. You haven't really penetrated to the core with it. You haven't analyzed it enough. It is the mind that is most important. The mind is the crux of the matter here. And so the mind is the primary thing, because if the mind doesn't think about it, we can't do something. It is the mind that is the most important. The reason is that unless your mind intends to do so, your body cannot possibly do anything good or bad. And so here, the mind is the most important. And what's the reason for that? The reason is that whatever it is that we want to do, well, who is it that first thinks about doing it? Well, it's our mind that first thinks about doing it. And so if we want to do something virtuous with our body, if we do something virtuous with our body, it cannot happen unless we have a good, kind, virtuous motivation in our mind. Similarly, if we want to do something non-virtuous with either our body or our mind, unless we have a bad motivation, an evil motivation in our mind, then there's no way that we can do a misdeed or non-virtue. And so without having either a good or bad motivation in our mind, it is impossible for us to do anything virtuous or anything non-virtuous with our bodies. Both of these are impossible. And so for that reason, if you ask who is most important, the body or what is most important, the body or the mind, it is the mind that is primary. It is the mind that is most important. It is similar with the speech. Where did it go? Nor can your voice express anything good or evil. And so here, when we are talking about something, when we are using our speech, it is our mind that is most important. If we have a good motivation in our mind, a good thought in our mind, then we can say good things, virtuous things. If we don't have that, how can we say virtuous motivations? When we say good things, it is because we have a good, virtuous motivation in our mind that we can say them. Similarly, when we say bad things, when we say harsh and unpleasant things with our speech, well, how is it that this can happen? It can only happen because we have because we have a bad motivation in our mind. And so no matter what we do, no matter what it is that we do, what it is that we say, whether we are saying good things or whether we are saying bad things, it really depends upon, first, our minds. It was first we think of something in our mind, and then after we've thought of them, we say it. And so if we don't think about it in our mind first, then there's no way we can have any conversation about it. There's no way we can possibly say anything about it. And so in this way, in terms of both the body and the mind is more important. And in terms of the speech and the mind, it is the mind that is more important.
Tene ta teacher na tene ta kamdana sone semso chegre semne kunla onjur jalbonda se ta jalbodonda pembo chembodonda ta ti kaka kare nana ya tene lungani dugu yorela lune gedikenji yoboyen hisumba tar ta kaje tei tamji nan tende som yorela tene semte tambone jalbonda boti kade nang tene ludong ngani boti ti legati chegu yorela tene jalbonda boti kade manana tene lungani legati chegi yo mare yoboti legati chegi yo mare hisumba tar semdene jalbotabo lungani yobotabu yeno tene tati zo chewa ta tandang aranso jitang tene tingen sen gangu yore hine gangu yore, lanton gangu yore, sanjinelu to gu yore, sanjinelu to batang yo maya pa, te yapo, nyamlin si gu yore la, te si gu bi junsin de tombo lula ta sochu yapo, tangni rang, tene gewa drupatan tipa ponga, tap si gu gari, yana ngala sochu tangni si gu yore, te gu yomare. zo ti zawa ti khana tu yore sin san tu yore tini ti sem ti la zo ju ya bo je tang tu na sem ti tini dubu gi chu la mandwa ya bu gi chu la ndwa tini ti ta tanda dubu gi on de sin na mariba momba la so ba go ma chorwa tini te la herap ta yi he la so ba salburn ju ge tap ti shena tini sem ti ya bu ji yung yore la teacher na Semte culture yore.
So the mind is therefore the primary factor. As is said, the mind rules over everything like a king. So the mind is like the king, or it's like the president. And so whatever the body or speech does, first the mind has to has to give the order to do it. If the mind doesn't give the order, then the body and speech don't do anything. The body is a servant. The body is a servant for all good or evil deeds. This is something that is said in many different instruction manuals. And so the mind is like the king. And then the body and speech do the work of this king. And if the king doesn't give the command and say, go do that, then the body and speech aren't going to do it. And so in that way, your mind is like the king, and both your body and speech are its servants. And so here, what is the main thing? The main thing is that we need to do samadhi. We need to practice meditation. We need to do tranquility meditation or insight meditation. And this is something that we do with our minds. It is something we need to generate realization in our mind. And not only do we need to generate, it's not just a question of generating realization in our mind, but we actually need to practice it. We need to practice this realization. And so is this something where we have to do something to our body, alter our body in some way, and then accomplish virtue and give up non-virtue? Or is it something where we need to change our speech in the same way, alter our speech in some way? These aren't really the main thing. These aren't really the most important thing. Really the root that it all comes down to, the absolute crux of the matter that it all comes down to is our mind. And it is our mind that we need to change. We need to make sure that our mind does not fall into fall in the direction of the bad stuff, and we need to make sure that it goes in the direction of the good stuff. And so in order to make sure that we don't fall in the bad direction, we need to get rid of our ignorance. We need to get rid of our dullness or our delusion, and we then need to develop our wisdom. We need to develop our intelligence and develop clarity in our mind. And if we do this, then our minds will go well. And so for that reason, it is the mind that is most important.
Tene ta tejen do yang ta tanda nyemong ba go on de sena yang jin dra la ten he dang ji kap so rang sem zo che on dra di zo che ta gu ta kap ka la ngarang la mga we me je dang che pa la ten ne he dang ji ge yo la ta te ngarang daw yin sam ba ta he dang ji we kap so la tene su zo che ge do che ge daw di zo che ge do nang ge sem di zo che ge do ya bo ta gu ge yo re 대견도 나랑당 튼베 니제 라 착바시당 현바제 갑슬라야 랑그 셈 조치오 니디 조치 또 다디 간디 조치게도 야보제 또나 초동 제외진 단니 니지 세종 다 해당 제외기 진데 라티기 제바레 대서 제외기 진데 니지 제바 연종 자와 강을 두요아레세나 저 랑그 셈데 중에 랑그 셈 조치오 키고 근데 랑그 셈데 조치게 요아레.
When we think about the afflictions, the disturbing emotions, when we think about the afflictions, for instance, when you get angry at your enemy, you must examine whether the primary factor is your mind or the enemy. What is most important? So sometimes we run into someone we don't like and we feel aversion, we feel hatred towards them, or we feel anger to them and we think, oh, there's my enemy, and then we feel angry about that. But when we feel that anger, when we feel the hatred, well, what is it that is the most important? Is it our mind is it the enemy that's most important, or is it the mind that's most important? We need to look at this very carefully. Similarly, when you feel attached to a friend, so when you feel attached to a friend or a relative, someone whom you feel a lot of clinging and attachment to, examine whether your mind or the friend is the primary factor. And so we need to look at what is the most important thing. Examining in this way, you must acknowledge that although the friend and the enemy are the circumstances in which the attachment and anger arises, the real cause originates in your own mind. And so when you look at it this way, the friend, the person that you like is it's here says circumstance. You can also say condition, the condition that leads to attachment, and the enemy is the condition or the circumstance that leads to the anger, but the actual real cause of it is in our mind. The actual real cause originates in your mind, and your mind is the most important.
Tene tatanda data buga damo tazo chewa semi bala tinaorela tikasala dig kuparte takumanguma ta tikaptana tapare kuparte tantana kupari orela tikuparte cho ye pala purbajinzai purbate tene inde se tukala surzo orela tene ti junsen te kandire se na tene chitang purba kahi ge tene pe nredang dan la so ba ka thong king ni ba yore song ge yore purba te chang ge yore zubu la ta ge yore tene dalan chupa tap na ti chen ko ge song ge yore te mare tinde mare song te jendol yang kahi ge song na purba te ni ba chim bu yore ta ti danda bu te ten pa zo ni te samba ngem ba tinde se na tel ne ba chim bu chal tu re samba yore ti mare tinde mare ti som no te norore la ta karire se na purbatela sorsom yor purbala chitan sorsom yor sorsom bote kandire se na rang dejo ndolge nyembota hedan ndolge nyembota tumung ndolge nyembote tosom ndolge nyemborela ti tosom ndolge nyembo imbichana purbate parzu bo mai purbate rang san surzu gre
And so here it is the mind that is most important. And at the time that he was giving these instructions about the mind being most important, there was a picture taken of Khenpo Gangshar. And in the picture, he is holding in his right hand a purba, a three-sided dagger. And he's holding that purba, and he's holding it like this, pointing at his own heart. And so what is the reason for holding the purba like that? Well, some people, when they see this purba, when they see the three-sided dagger, they say, this is something that has a special power to be able to get all those ghosts and demons and all those obstructors. And so if we have it, then we can, sort of get them with it, and we can stick them with it, and that'll protect our mind with it. But that's actually not what it is. Other people will say, well, this purba is a really powerful knife, and if we've got this enemy, we can stab them with him, and then they won't be able to have a bad motivation and hurt us in any ways. But actually, that's not how it is either. These are both wrong. But the purba has three sides. And so why is it that the purba has three different sides? It has three different sides because it represents the antidote for desire. It represents the antidote for hatred, and it represents the antidote for delusion. So it represents the antidotes for the three different poisons. And so for that reason, rather than pointing the purba, rather than pointing the dagger out, you point it inside towards yourself.
tene ta te tabu ke chna tene te khong ke ta penda bote tandan di kuparte da parela tene ti kapsala tanda compared de la kabangamonda je na ti tongche ti ke mena che kudo sige ore Pingsan jami ke main jorne yushu sege yore tati ke sanit nala parkhang che ya patinal tene khone ke farja de indizin probati tukala chone tene rang sem tin dolgure zone probati tukala chone part japna ore.
And so he had this picture taken at this time. Khenpo Gangshar had the picture taken at that time. And at that time, he took the picture to a place, he had this picture of him holding the purbu pointing at his own heart. And he took that to a place that at that time was called Jekundo. Now, because the Chinese have taken over, they call it Yushu. He brought it there and he went to the printer and he had this picture reprinted of himself holding the purba, pointing at his own heart as a symbol of the need to tame our own minds. And so that is why he made the picture of himself holding the purba.
Tene Thrangu chunti te sam sena tene ya twa tangkin ro yo na twa na ro.
And so that is enough for our afternoon session, but perhaps some of you have some questions, and if you do, please ask. It looks like we have a microphone set up for the questions, is that right? So please come forward to the microphone and make a line for questions.
Thank you, Rinpoche. Why did Khenpo Gangshar burn the prophecy?
Khenpo Gangshar ge longten na beka so de tambo de longten de me 6 ans. De jun gais.
Ta te khong ge men san ra bo ji so ne ta te ke chen bo chin ji ma re nga la ta nong ra bo da longten ra bo kan yung ko ma re te yu ga nan de ge so re tin de chen la te men sa so ne ta ji nga tu to yen nga pe chen bo yen longten ya bo yen so ma yin pa pe men ba ra bo ta te tan chen bo yo ji ma re khong go yin ji ba go so ne ti jing ge me la se pare se to.
Well, it was to keep himself in a lower place. He thought to himself, well, I'm not really a great meditator. I'm not a great teacher. I don't have a lot of pure perception. I can't give prophecies, and so that is the reason why he threw it away and burned it in the fire. And so the reason for doing this is in order to keep himself in a low, humble position, out of humility. And so rather, it's not a situation. He said it's not a situation where he was saying, oh, I'm this great person, I'm a Mahasiddha, I'm great, I can make these prophecies and things like that. Rather, he was being humble about it. And so that is the meaning. And so it's probably like that. Actually, that is what he himself said about it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Rinpoche. This is a question about karma. If there is no apparent or inferential direct cause, is bodily illness a result of a karmic condition or simply samsara or both? And how do they relate one to another, karma and samsara in that context?
Legi korla ne de shindu ko juriam bala ne kakala lugi natsa chi lula natsa chi poyera de pobe kaso de mixegi ju ane potugumendo wa kakala kaso natsa de la mixegi ju angu yuname hagumendo de daba kaso de natsa de Ani le latini kegenas, yana kora latini kegenas, yana korwa. Kora latini kegenas, yana niga latini kegenas. De kaso le dan korwa la ani mixigito gais.
De latini chege na korwa latini chege na nika latini chege.
La.
Le te korwa senkin te chitang jitin che kham de nedang la korwa sigi yorwa. Korwa latini chege mare. Ta chitang korwa la dedu namba na chopa unju yoba je re mat. Ti tsawa te kana ra lege yore se na le latini chege yore la. Tini te yang le te la yang chitang ngaranzo namba sanje be tawe ke onda se na nganje le tang chalji jinsi ta namba ni yore la te zo te le la te ne de du je ge yore te yina ya te la ya te chalji jin ta je kap ka la se ku te ne te je chalji jin mandawa la te ne de du namba na so pa yung yore la te na sa te ya kap ka la nganje le la te ne je wa ta yang nganje le te ya ne kap chalji jin la te ne yo tende yung ba te yina ya tan korwa yina ta je do na sa da bo yung gi chab gi yo mare ya de du da manda tan jitin korwa sing ki de du da manda yung gi yo la teacher na zo le la te ne je gi yo la ti le la te ne je wa tin yung gi jo te ya ne ka chalji jin na te ne yung gi yo re.
When we say samsara is just the way the world is, and so it's not. And so illness doesn't happen because of samsara. Just the way samsara is that there are all sorts of various different sufferings and happinesses that we can experience. And so when illness happens because of on the basis of samsara. It is because of our previous karma. Now, when we talk about karma, in the Buddhist view, we have two things. We have the prior karma, and we have the circumstances, the circumstances, the temporary circumstances. And here the main thing sometimes is the karma, but there are also contributing circumstances, temporary circumstances that can happen. So sometimes an illness is just because of karma, and sometimes there are these circumstances like the food or the clothing or what have you, various different circumstances. And these can lead to various different types of happiness or various different types of unhappiness or suffering. And so sometimes illness comes from the previous karma, and sometimes it comes out of the cause of karma, but with the conditions of the circumstances in there. And so when we are in samsara, that's not you aren't necessarily sick when you're in samsara. There are various different types of happiness and various different types of suffering that we experience in samsara. But when we have an illness, then it can come out of the previous, the prior karma, and also the conditions of the temporary circumstances.
Thank you.
Hello, Rinpoche. This morning, I understood that it's possible to have white motivation and black activity.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 4 cases, but this is the one that will confuse me. And this afternoon I hear that what I believe I'm hearing is that that mind rules speech and body. So if mind rules speech and body, it's unclear to me how motivation, which I associate with mind, can be separate from the activity of speech or the activity of body. Mm-hmm. So it's unclear to me how one can be white and one can be black.
Dagung ngatugi chetungi kasu de la ane samba joro la ane samba karbo la joro napo shebe kasu dene chitam mushi tsiyere de kasu de samba karbo la joro napo de shida gogumundu tenge gontogi chutun kasu dene de sem de yabo tabo da de semgi ane kama na dene lungaki le chemi sipare derabu yina de la ane sem기 kunong 아니 류가기 조로데니 간에시 신도드니 카가 용기에 나서
테네 다텔라 somba karla 조로와 낙바생기데 페르나 파마게 부글라 제와 침부고네 다티 부고데 라 데지 존엄 노르두고도 somne 가주당나 tene tege samba pe karvore ta tel pengre samba kamo yore mato tela negre samba kamo yore mare jorwa nakwa ta tsikso ndabo tende labare la tene tela samba karla jorwa nakwa sege yore tene tege samba karla jorwa nakwa te ya kanate ni jungi yore se na tene togung ge chunting kasi hebege tanda sen kala onju jabonda singite 당보 삼백 건호가 야보티 간이 중화래세나 네 센조 체와라 되는 중화래 드니 조르바 나빠팅 간이 중화래세나 다티 대지 생고 맞으니 드니 칭이 직접 라비아바티 드니 대야 다 생그 건호라 되는 중게 요아르마도 생고 말이나 디 조르바 나빠팅 용게 요 말이라 디처나 티니 가단다고 저거 요 말이
When we talk about a white motivation and a black action or a black deed, then if we give an example of it, it's like you have parents, and parents have have children, and they really love their children a whole lot, but then the child misbehaves, and when the child misbehaves, they then say something to the child, and they say something kind of harsh, and they use harsh words. And so here, the motivation in the mind is a white one. The motivation is to help the child, not to harm the child, but the speech is harsh. It's a harsh words, harsh speech. And so that is something that we would call a white motivation and a black deed. And so when we talk about this white motivation and the black deed, well, how is it that this happens? As in this afternoon session, the mind is like the king who rules over everything like a king. And so when we have the motivation to do something, where does that motivation come from? The motivation comes from the mind. It is the mind that is primary there. But then, at the time that we do something, at the application or the actual act, the deed is black, and that is because the mind was unable to bear something, or was unable to be patient, and so then you said something harsh at that time. And so here, there's the motivation that's in the mind. And so if the mind didn't think about it, then it couldn't happen. And so in this way, these two are not contradictory in any way.
Tene samba karla jorwa nakpate penang humaga loju yore la tene jirab gan sanji ki jirab gan nama tene sanji jom dinde te tepen nindop jinsingi te la ko jewa ye tene ta ti kapsula jagarne memangbo ta tanda jansuno linting tangji ki nama tene do mandawa nobu mandawa tende yaba tenzo lembala drogi yore la tene tel truchembo tende ki nando tene truchembo ki nando nye ngaja sa tende hiongwa ki nando tende chedu tela tene ta tel zo ngotik dabo te tepen Bembo jay yaba tige tepen tela nidop jinsiki yor tene kongin ro kasula tinana me samba ngemba jinji yor ta ti samba pe napo tene korange chomba tenzola chomba ngajala zane gagi yor marela ten kanga si gogudo ta ngarang hyedo gogudo te korang zo si tabaji shegi so tene tika sol trotila tene kampu ni tene tino ni cho yanzu ni tene troti ma janzu no sain ni hyedo gre sombe tene koga te lekati chegi warela te chepa te tepa nyintop jingan thongdu te la tini pe kongke ta menga jasegre tini koranya hegre tini ta te la tini korang nyalwalan dogre ta tele ngarang la dipa yungre te ina yung korang seiga na te menga jati so jab thogre sane te kongke tini timete ngola tari jabni sevarela te tabaji yana samba karla jorwa nakwa ta phate na samba sangbure menga jag so jabe ke chedre jorwa nakwa re meje se ga barela ta te tabula tini pe ga yore.
Another example comes from a story of about a white motivation and a black deed. Back, we found this in the stories of the lives of the Buddha. In one of his previous lives, the Buddha was born as a captain called Captain Courageous. I know that sounds terrible these days because of Joseph Conrad. Thanks, Joseph, but that's really what his name, Captain Courageous. And he was even a sailor. It makes it even worse. But at any rate, in India at that time, many people would cross the ocean in boats, and they'd go to the Jewel Islands, and they would collect all sorts of jewels and things like that. And so Captain Courageous was in a great boat with 500 different merchants, and so he was like the captain. He was in charge of that. And so but among all of the people in the boat, there was one person there who had a really bad motivation, someone who had a really black mind, and he really didn't like those 500 merchants, and he decided he wanted to kill them. He thought to himself, well, I'm going to die in the process, but I'm going to kill all those merchants. And then, so thinking in this way, he went down into the hold, and he started trying to bore a hole in the hull of the ship, and to sink the ship and kill all of those merchants. And so this is of course, a very bad action. Now, Captain Courageous saw this, and he decided, well, he's going to kill these 500 people, and he's going to die himself in the process. And as a result of this, he's going to end up going to hell. And so even though it would be a misdeed for me to do it, I need to kill him. And if I kill him, then I will save those 500 people. And so he went down there, and he whacked him on the head with the axe, and he killed him. And so this is an example of a white motivation and a black deed. If you look at it, you see that, if you look at it from afar, you see, well, his motivation was really pretty good. He wanted to save those 500 people. But his action, the deed, was black. He killed someone.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Rinpoche, this is related to the last question on white motivation and black deed. In English, there's this phrase, unintended consequences. When you mean well, but your action, which you thought was harmless, does harm or is not well received for some reason. Does that become a black deed? Or, on the other hand, does it indicate, or possibly also, that your motivation wasn't as pure as you thought it was?
Samba Karla Jordanar Kasudi Kakalangas indicate unintended consequences de Mindupagi Jebu Rabo. Mindupagi Jebu Kakala Yongro. Pena and Kakala de Kuno Yabo Yores, Nimis Samba Sambo Rabo Chires, in the Jorda Chebekas, in the Mishandala Nugures, Yana Conso Yabo Samatang Yabo. Lengumaris, so Gagamendova, de Kaka Yongrus, de Derabina, de Jora de Napochagianas, Yana de la Ane Rangi Kunon de Dapa de Tsam, my impetat Rabuyanas.
Kunhunte Tapaji la Samba Karaba, Segremato, Kunhunte some Tapa Maina Tak, Samba Nola, Jorwa Napala Dogriva, teacher na Kunhun. Number tapan dapat jika goni, teni cepat te cingemban dapat cepat kaki, guni rangin la pembek jawa yang patah, teni kaki yang te si norni, tang harang sampai kabu ini, samna yang sampai kabu te sam mahi pandabu ya samba tene yena nepa yung sigirba te rangi tachi yabu sene tene samba skarwa tene ti drebu te ya yena pento jachimbo tanda tepe nyintub jindabu ta tene yena pento jachimbo yung na te dipama gewalan rogu mare gewalan rogu yore tene ya ngarangi mahi ne norwandabu ta tene ti yena pen tapa samba karbo tele yorwa napa ti shukche sam yo na tene ti pangu pandabu jireba.
It's when the motivation is really white, and when it's actually pure motivation, that's when we talk about it being white. And when it's not all that pure motivation, then it becomes a black motivation leading to a black deed. And so here, this is talking about something in a really utterly pure, completely pure motivation. And so here, and so we might have the motivation to do something to benefit ourselves and others. We might have that motivation, but then we are mistaken about it. And so we think that we have a white motivation. We think that it's a white motivation, but actually we don't really know what the white motivation is. And as a result of that, we end up doing something harmful. And so for that reason, we really need to examine and look at our motivations really very, very carefully. And so if it is actually really and truly a white motivation, then it is something that can really lead to a vast amount of benefit for a lot of people. Just as in the example of Captain Courageous. That was an action that was not by any stretch was that a misdeed or non-virtue. It was it could only be a virtuous action. But it is possible. If we don't know, then we can be mistaken, and we'll think that we're doing something white, but it really is just a black action, and it's a black motivation, a black action, and that's something that we need to give up.
Thank you, Rinpoche. Would Rinpoche please tell us a little bit about his own experiences with Khenpo Gangshar and maybe a bit about what he learned from him?
Rinpoche ani Khenpo Gangshar ani kunun yupe kap ge ani loju test shenaro na
Kundun
Khenpo Gangshar kundun jebe kaso Rinpoche ge Khenpo Gangshar jebe kaso de shenaro.
Khenpo Gangshar de jitang ta lama cheparchi yinda mandawa jiri ngara samba yore la tene ta te huma hira hi tsog me la tene di kap la tene kong tangbo tsur pe yung kap la tene me mambu ke dangwa cheparchi top chong 신라 제버진 톱종 신 멤버들 랍송 다 되는 가랑게 되네 다제 신라 제버진 톱주래 다제 이거지래 섬도 근데 정송라 되네 정송라 되네 다 당분이 맞을런지 니만 일런지 가야 접어서 가야 접어서 tene taa tela misal ge tene semti ji shogu kare teji naro ji shona taa che me yenda kakala yung do ngala che yung me no enda so tene teji namdu tela tene ya te kare oda so kaya jo ba tene jima taa kala so se tene kala sa kala te lama ge sunju te tende ing do ga so raje tene ngarana tene sorwa yin manda wan tene do tende jini lamati sala tende ing do ga so do tende onyo la tela tene sala cheparchi yore so pata yore la tene huma ngarang lo chung ga ka la tene ngarang ge pesa chusa ge kembo Khenpo ji yore Khenpo saying good thing with you Lord Rapsa Khenpo Lodro Rinpoche ke je ware la tige tene pesak la kan shu tene tige chuni ke korta tene ta ti ko la kan to ma batang tang de la tene kong ke kalat na ka so o tene ti ti chilo la so ma tang man nang la kha ko de ti so ma ta na tengre tene song ta 아, 다 실로 성로 다마도 나는 간디지 갖고 줘. 사바텐데 제념데 드네 되게 캠보 강혈지도 어떻게 나랑 캠보게 나는 갖고 있는데 이거 누가서 근데 원요
Really, Khenpo Gangshar was a Lama who was unlike any others, I think. Actually, at first, before he came, I really didn't know much about him. And then I didn't know a whole lot about him. And then at the time that he was going to come, a lot of people said, "Oh, he's got the greatest instructions. You get the best blessings from him." A lot of people said that. And so I thought, he's going to come and I'm going to get some blessings too. So I thought that way. And I thought, I'm going to get them too. And then he came. And he was there, and it's like, the first day, nothing. And then on the second day, nothing. I thought, oh man. Well, actually, people said that it's from his instructions on the mind that you get the blessings. So I'm gonna ask for those, and then I'll get the same blessings that other people got too. And so I asked for the instructions on the mind. Nothing. Nothing happened. And then later, I one day when eating, I had this experience like, that's what the Lama was talking about. That's what it is. And this feeling that I'd never had, this feeling unlike any other happened. And then I realized, yeah, he is really a Lama who has these really great blessings, these really wonderful blessings. This really is. And so this is how it happened. These are really the great blessings. And so before that, when I was really young, I had a Khenpo Lodro Rinpoche, who taught me who taught me about the philosophy. And when he was teaching me about the philosophy, he taught a lot about the Dharma nature, the Dharmata. And when he was teaching about that, I asked a lot of questions about that. And he said to me at that time, Khenpo Lodro Rinpoche said to me at that time, you shouldn't think about outside things so much, but rather turn your attention inwards and look at your own mind. And Rinpoche says, I thought to myself, man, I'll only think about the outside things. The internal mind is not all that important. But then when I met Khenpo Gangshar and I realized what he was talking about, I thought, this is exactly what my Khenpo was talking about.
Hi, Rinpoche. In talking about motivation and action and deed, I'd like to know about non-action, if that is non-virtuous or considered a black deed, or is it neutral? For instance, if we know the right thing to do, but we're afraid to do it, so we do nothing, or if we just don't know what the correct action is, so we do nothing. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Napo chagina, sperana kakala de lega yandapa de muni gewegi lega de hakugire sina jipa jita kene ro de gaya machena de jordan pobaraba mena de shenan sawina de gaya mache de le napo dabo chagina siana kakala ane de gewa de gaya ba hamakone de ane chia mache ina stean ane jordan yamba dabo chagina
tatela le zomboso anu tel pen yung greba tini le ngemba so anu tela devo ngemba Andrevo Niba, Nimi, you are la. Tinitanda le zambo de so matupatilla, Nimi Yungumare. Nimi Yungumarilla, Tinitile Zombo of Pen de Yungumarva, the Copopa Hum, Tinisa Matuparilla, Tintil Nimi Yungumarilla, Tinpen de Yungumarita, in the Tomba, the Bochagava.
When we do good deeds, when we do good karma, that is something that leads to a benefit. And when we do bad karma, that's something that leads to a bad result, or that leads to a problem, to a defect, a difficulty. And so when we are not able to do the good things, then that doesn't lead to any problem. It doesn't lead to any bad result. It doesn't bring any benefit, but when we just can't do anything, when we don't have enough courage, when we don't have enough confidence to do something and we don't do anything at all, it doesn't bring us any, it doesn't lead to any bad result, but it doesn't bring us any benefit either. It's like it's just empty.
다들이 잠주도 못 나오지 말이. 니 잠주도 못 흉킹텐서 야 don't pet 나나 말해.
So we're doing refuge vows today, aren't we? So all of those who are requesting the refuge vow, please come up to the front. So don't be shy, come up to take your refuge vow, and we'll make a line, I think, in front of Rinpoche. Is that right? Is it 2 people? Oh. Well, wonderful.
잠주 담바 휴 갑슬라 다제르도 당보 초섬 살와들라 데네 초섬 살네 다제당 그 초섬 살와티 사지 주 겐덴데 근주름 버진 넘바섬나 예 섬베고니 초섬 살 데니 부모 예바 살아죠 예발랑 라바니 닝칼라 탈모 자르데 티 준생 카리레스나 누마 산지 좀 된데 샬유브 갑라 티 로마초게야 구베놈 줄라틴데 셰게 요레라 티 산지 진세바 지스 템베게 테나 담바쇼 갑슬라틴데 난게 요레라 티 갑슬랑 아랑게 손데제 인댕게레라 담발렘베게 초가데 템두 담발렘베 초가데 댕게레라 티 베기 되는 댕게레 티 텐다라 카리 요레세나 Tini ngara sanje chu genden te kenchur mbochi namba songa japsun rogi yin sinkinji yawarela. Ti ngarangi labati jidu pe kap laya semje teni ya ti tardo kenchur mbochi namba songa japsun ro ni tambi chuchi gola hupa yin sambatinde nangukure.
When we are taking the refuge vows, the first things that we do is we do 3 prostrations. And when we do the 3 prostrations, we are prostrating to the Buddha, we are prostrating to the Dharma, and we are prostrating to the Sangha. We are prostrating to the precious 3 jewels. And then after making doing the 3 prostrations, you kneel with your right knee on the ground and your left knee raised and your hands joined at your heart in prayer. And the reason that we kneel in this way is that at the time that the Buddha was actually present in the world, when his students would ask him questions out of great respect, they would kneel in that very same position. So when we take vows, we kneel in this same position as a way to remind ourselves of the Buddha, to remind ourselves of the deeds of the Buddha. And then after that, Rinpoche will recite the liturgy, or the words of the refuge vow. And the words of the refuge vow, these are something that we say them in Tibetan. But what is the meaning of these? Well, the basic meaning of them is that I am going for refuge in the Buddha. I am going for refuge in the Dharma. I'm going for refuge in the Sangha. I'm going for refuge in the precious 3 jewels. And so as Rinpoche says the words, please repeat what he says after him. And at the same time, keep this meaning in your mind. Think to yourself that I am going for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. That I am entering the gate of the Dharma. And so now do the 3 prostrations. Join your hands at your crown, throat, and heart. And then put your hands on the ground. Bring your knees together down to the ground. Touch your foreheads. That's 1. Now stand up. And then again, touch your hands to your crown, your throat, your heart. Put your hands to the ground. Bring your knees down together. Touch your head. That's 2. The 3rd time. Now touch your head. Oh yeah. Now kneel with your right knee down, your left knee raised, and sit back on your back heel. Oh yeah, it's nice and comfortable. If you can. And then join your hands at your heart in prayer and recite after Rinpoche. Now please repeat.
Chogyam
Chogyam
Trungpa Rinpoche Changchup Sempa Tamji Dala Gongsuso Lopen Dala Gongsuso Datu Dene Zonte Chisit Tsoye Pardo Kani Namjinchu Sanjela Japsun Chio Dechatang Jalwa Namjinchu Chula Japsun Chio Tsu Namjinchu Pape Gendun Namla Japsun Chio Dachisi Tsoye Pardo Japsum Zinpe Genyendo Lopenji Zongdu Sol Chogyam Yupe Sanjetang Changchup Sempa Tamji Dala Gongsuso Lopen Dala Gongsuso Datu Dene Zonte Chisit Tsoye Pardo Kani Namjinchu Sanjela Japsun Chio Dechatang Jalwa Namjinchu Chula Japsun Chio Tsu Namjinchu Pape Gendun Namla Japsun Chio Dachisi Tsoye Pardo Japsum Zinpe Genyendo Lopenji Zongdu So Tati sonde te ling som to jigrela te nan ling tangbu ni te truparela ta ling sumba te njup la segul je dagre te karire se na japsundu dambati lembe kapsula dambati togrela topati tophila te ni togiyore tophi se du ta nga kenchurum boche namba som jetong ni japsundu damba top chong tene tangbi chuchi gola hiu samba yin samba ka kumhung te ne damba te togi yore oan rabo je na onzin gola yore damba te togi yore de danda damba naung ka sola onzin rabo tene kanyi yo mare la tene segul te dapa ka sola damba te top chong samba top hi ne tene ti kap sola senjin tong chi la pembe chi te yin samba kumhung nambar topa ji nang ro chi.
So we recite the vow 3 times, and now the first and second repetitions have been finished. Now comes the third repetition. At the end of the third repetition, Rinpoche will snap his fingers. And why does he snap his fingers? He snaps his fingers because the way you receive the vow of refuge is by thinking to yourself that you've received it. And so, why is that? It's when you think, I have, in the presence of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, I have received this vow of refuge. I have entered the gate of the Dharma. It is by this motivation that you receive the vow. Now, if you're doing an empowerment or a ceremony like that, there are implements, tools of the empowerment that are placed on your head, and at that point you know that you've received the empowerment. But here, when we're taking the vow, there is no implement, there's no tool that's being used. And so, at the time that, and that is why we snap the fingers, at the time that the fingers are snapped, then think to yourself that I have received this vow, I have taken this vow. In this way, you know, by knowing that you've received it, then you will receive it. And so please, at this point, have the pure motivation that you are doing for this for the benefit of all sentient beings. Now please repeat.
Chogyam
Trungpa
Sanjetan
Sanjetan
Jangchup Sempa Tamji
Tamje
Dala
Gonsuso
Lopan Dala Gonsuso Datu Deni Zongte Chesit Soye Parto Kani Namjin Cho Sanjela Japsun Chiu Decha Tang Talwa Namjin Cho Chula Japsun Chiu So Namjin Cho Pope Gendun Namla Japsun Chiu Dachese Soye Parto Japsum Zinpe Genyin To Lopenji Zondo So Tene Tatige Japsundro Dambate Shubarela Tene Te Jesu Tate Mejibe Tendavala Khenpo Rinpoche number samla tepata ichi petento kitsu ne trate si tene meji petento tombe chuchi gola super tento mensa baje togre tene chena bani permagen de penaro chi.
That completes the taking of the vow, and now as a way to not forget this, to not forget that you have had the faith and devotion in the presence of the three jewels. In order not to forget that, Rinpoche will cut a small amount of hair from the top of your head, and then also so that you do not forget that you have entered the gate of the Dharma, a new Dharma name will be given to you. So now please come forward to receive, to have your hair cut and receive your name.
Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharmaya Namo Sanghaya 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 Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharmaya Angaya Tati Jesu Melam Jagurela Cherani, Tambi Chujugola, Yo, Japsundro, Damba Shibala, Parchi Mepata, Tene Tambichu, Nyamselem Bala, Parchi Mepa, Tambichu, Nyamlin Tarsin, Manam Jagarella, Cherani, Semjidene, Manam Teta, Japnarochi.
Now we will recite some aspiration prayers to you. Now that you have entered the gate of the Dharma and taken the vow of refuge, may you have no difficulties. May you have no obstacles or difficulties in your practice of the Dharma, and may you be able to bring your Dharma practice to the ultimate result. And so as we recite this prayer, please keep the same prayer in mind.
Ejanzen Dembara Jurje, Zombara Jeba, Zendara, Zombara Jurje, Zonjebo, Zopara Jurje, Zerab Tamje, Tambe, Junyamsa, Lembe, Galvada, Dembara Jurje, Darbe Janzen, Dembara Jurje, Zombara Jeba, Zendar, Zombara Jurje, Zonjebo, Bombo, Yonzo, Tambe, Junyamsa, Lembe, Galvada, Dembara Jurje, Darbe Janzen, Dembara Jurje, Sombara Jeba, Zendara, Zombara Sultrimje, Bombo, Yonzo, Zobara Jurje, Zerab Tamje, Tambe, Junyamsa, Lembe, Galvada, Dembara Jurje, Trimje, Sultrimje, Meje, Sultrim, Nambara, Dada, Lomse, Mebe, Sultrimje, Sultrim, Baru, Jinzo, Yo, Jarwa, Ganje, Jeso, Lomjo, Zangbo, Jeba, Yonzo, Zoze, Jen, Sultrim, Jeba, Jeme, Yonda, Barada, Ma, Jeme, Jebara, Yo, Lula, Jugu, Sumje, Tahi, Yo, Mala, Dene, Sumje, Tahi, Semla, Laba, Sumje, Tahi, Gunla, Gunju, Sumje, Tahi, Yo. Tati, Jam to Dambati Trubai.
That completes the refuge vow.
Okay.
And after that, aren't we doing the Bodhisattva vow too?
Tene ta tela Changchu Senji Dambate ta kashi desi tene trogyor. Tene trolli ki junsen kare desi na tene Changchu Senji Dambate lendu tela tene ta yena nesem ta hedon la sopa mechewa dambalembare. Tini ti dambati lani, tini kavkala nesem tang hedang la sopa je, dambati nyam, tini tela tini je ngarang la, nyemi chimbun jungwa tang, tini ngesong te jewa la sopa ta, tini yungre sombe, njito yungi yo re, re te yin ya ti njito te je gu yo ma re la, junsen kare re se na, tene chitang tene ta genin ge dambata getsul ge dambata tene gelong ge dambala so bata bachi yena lunga ge dambarela lunga ge dambati ta dambati hyo dambati hyuni ngarang ge yinchi minchi songgu ge yabata songni nyam sona dambati nyam do ge yabarela shongchu senji dambati ta tende mare tene lunga ke song na tapena getsong go dambati lunga ke song na song tu gi yore shonju senji dambati lunga ke damba mare semji dambare la tene sente la nam tu ndamanda chegere kapkala rawang khira yo mare la tene teacher na na hedan chege me na nesem chege me somne kapkala nesem che hogre la tene teacher na shonju senji dambati damba sunya ge chedur hyogi yo mare damba tel komya ge chedur hyogi yo la yani yando hyo tene te cherna ta ge chung ge damba da buji na sarche ma tu hyogi yo mare hyuli luso yo mare te yena ya shonju senje damba te cheten la kukarso na gi zon cheten la kukarso na yangse kukarso na tene kabu chogre la pe te yendo shonju senje damba te yani yando lang na tene ngarang sen la pocha zangbo remji per yabu yung yo re
when we do the bodhisattva vow, when we take the bodhisattva vow, a lot of people get afraid about that. And what is the reason for people getting afraid? Well, they think, oh, now I've taken this vow, and this vow is that I will never do anything to harm anyone else, and I will never get angry at anyone else. And but sometimes you feel malice, and sometimes you feel anger at something. And if I feel that malice, or if I feel that anger or hatred, then the vow will be weakened, I'll lose the vow, and this is going to really lead to a lot of difficulties, a lot of problems. This will be a real fault for me. As a result of this, I'll fall into the lower realms. And so this is the sort of fear that people sometimes feel with regard to the bodhisattva vow. But actually, there's no need to be afraid about taking the bodhisattva vow. And why is there no need to be afraid about taking the bodhisattva vow? Well, when you take vows like the lay precepts or the novice monks or the full monks' vows, those are vows of your body and your speech. When you take those vows, you retake the vow and then you keep them, and you have to keep them. If you don't keep them, if you break the vow, then you have lost the vow. But the bodhisattva vow is not like that. The bodhisattva vow is not a vow of body and speech. If it were a vow of body speech, it would be something that you can keep. If it's like the novice monk's vow, those are vows that you can keep them. You take them and you can hold the vows, and so these are vows of the body and speech. But the bodhisattva vow is not a vow of the body and speech. And the reason is that it is a vow of the mind. Now, in our minds, there are all sorts of different thoughts that happen. We often don't have a lot of control over our mind, and so it's quite possible that you will feel hatred. It's quite possible that you will feel malice. This malice is going to happen. So we are not taking this vow as a vow that we need to protect, as a vow that we need to hold. Rather, we are taking this vow in order to habituate ourselves. This is a vow of habituating ourselves, and so we can take this vow over and over and over again. And when you take a vow like the novice monk vow, that's a vow that you can hold, and you can take that vow once and then you can take it. But the bodhisattva vow is not like that. You can take it over and over again. It's like, the example that's given is that it's like whitewashing a stupa. When you whitewash a stupa, every time you put a new coat of whitewash on it, then it gets whiter and whiter and whiter. And so in the same way, we take this bodhisattva vow, and we can take it over and over again. And the more we take it, the more it'll develop and the better it'll get.
Tene ta teacher na senji kan number top go ni ta chongju senji dambal lemba te kalba zambu yin samba sine tene cha sam sal tene te ji so jamju damba chai tambo nangrela jamju damba nangu bi junsin khari re se na tene chitang jamju damba te nangi ore te la tene tumong tiba tumong jamju damba te 다 더치 소에 파르토 시나타 나랑 다 마히 파르토라 담바테 숭기에 시네 담자와라 테네 티바 침부게 송주 센지 지잠주 담바테 더 송주 힘볼란 치제 파르토 숭기와라 더 송주 힘볼란 치제 파르토 시나 센델라 디제와치마 당나라 상지게 공부 마답가 파르토 숭이 섬 센지 펜휴 침보제 땅네 된잠주 담바테 랭게와라 테네 준신 teacher na tombo chosam sal tene pumo yepa sala zu yembalang laba ni ningala tamo jarte tene tumo ma impa sonchu senje jamdu dambate lemba tsete jidu na roji.
So for this reason, we need to have a pure motivation. We need to have the utterly pure motivation. Now, and so when we take the bodhisattva vow at that time, we need to have this pure motivation. And with this pure motivation, the first thing that we do in taking the vow is that we do 3 prostrations. then after we do the 3 prostrations, we will then take a vow of refuge. Now, what is the reason for reciting the vow of refuge? Well, of course, we've already done the vow of refuge, but there are a couple of different types of refuge vows. There's the common sort of refuge vow. And the common refuge vow is taking it for the duration of this life. And so that is until the time that we die, we are taking the refuge vow. But when we take the bodhisattva vow, when we go for refuge in the context of taking the bodhisattva vow, we are going for refuge until we reach enlightenment's essence. So until I reach enlightenment's essence, I am taking this vow. And until I reach enlightenment's essence, that means that until such time as I attain the state of Buddhahood, so for this life, for the next life, for the life after that, and until the time that we attain the complete and perfect state of Buddhahood, we are going for refuge in the 3 jewels. And so in order to do this, first we will do 3 prostrations, and then after the 3 prostrations, kneel with your right knee on the ground, the left knee raised, and your hands joined at your heart in prayer. And then following that, we will recite the words of the special vow of refuge, of the Bodhisattva vow after Rinpoche. So all those who are requesting this for the first time, please come to the front, and everyone else can do it along. Do the 3 prostrations. After your 3rd prostration, kneel with your right knee down, your left knee raised, your 2 hands joined at your heart in prayer position, and repeat the words after Rinpoche.
Changchub Nimbur,
Chanchu Nimbur,
Chije Par,
Chiji Bar,
Sanje Namla,
Sanje Namla,
Japso Che,
Kyapsum Chi,
Chue Dang Chanchu,
Chedan Chanchu,
Sembaye,
Senbai,
Sola On Tegin,
So Lang Deshin,
Japso Che,
Kyapsum Chi,
Changchub Nimbur,
Chanchu Nimbur,
Chije Par,
Chiji Bar,
Sanje Namla,
Sanje Namla,
Japso Che,
Kyapsum Chi,
Chue Dang Chanchu,
Chedan Chanchu,
Sembaye,
Senbai,
Sola On Tegin,
So Lang Deshin,
Japso Che,
Kyapsum Chi,
Changchub Nimbur,
Chanchu Nimbur,
Chije Par,
Chigi Bar,
Sanje Namla,
Sanje Namla,
Japso Che,
Kyapsum Chi,
Chue Dang Chanchu,
Chedan Chanchu,
Sembaye,
Senbai,
Sola On Tegin,
So Lang Deshin,
Japso Che,
Kyapsum Chi.
Yang Chao Sam Sam.
Now please make 3 more prostrations. And again, kneel, same way.
Chongchu Senji Damba Ngus Lembare La, Tini Tia, Nanji Sanji, Chongchu Semba Tamchi Chi, Tangpo, Chongchu Chu, Tup Kandi, Chepa Tarto, Nage, Tani Zonti, Chongchu Chu, Senji Yen, Nanji Sanji, Chongchu Semba Tamchi Chi, Chongchu Chu, Senji Ni, Tini, Chongchu Semba Chepa Kandi, Nama Tarto, Naranki Jung Te Tarto Chegi Yen, Senki Chegi, Seji Warela, Tiji Du Nani.
Now we have come to the actual Bodhisattva vow. And in the actual Bodhisattva vow, we are thinking just as all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the past at first developed bodhicitta, generated bodhicitta, so too shall I generate the perfect mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta. And just as the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the past have all, after generating bodhicitta, have all done the contact of the bodhisattva, so too shall I, from now on, follow this. Follow the conduct of the bodhisattva. And so these are the words, the meaning of the words, and please repeat them after Rinpoche.
Chitaranganje,
Chitaranganje,
Dehiji,
Deshigi,
Chanchup Tutne,
Chanchu Tutni,
Jepatang,
Jepatang,
Chanchup Sembe,
Chanchu Sembe,
Lapala,
Hlabala,
Deda Remigen,
Dedarimshin,
Nepatar,
Nepatar,
Dejindrola,
Deshindrola,
Pendento,
Pendendo,
Chanchup Semne,
Chanchu Semne,
Jejeshin,
Jegeshin,
Dejindun,
Deshindun,
Lapalang,
Hlabalang,
Rimbayendo,
Rimbashindu,
Laparaje,
Labargi,
Chitaranganje,
Chitaranganje,
Dehiji,
Deshigi,
Chanchup Tutne,
Chanchu Tutne,
Jepatang,
Jepatang,
Chanchup Sembe,
Chanchu Sembe,
Lapala,
Hlabala,
Deda Remigen,
Dedarimshin,
Nepatar,
Nepatar,
Dejindrola,
Deshindrola,
Pendento,
Pendendo,
Chanchup Semne,
Chanchu Semne,
Jejeshin,
Jegeshin,
Dejindun,
Deshindune,
Lapalang,
Hlabala,
Rimbayendo,
Rimbashindu,
Laparaje,
Labargi,
Hatela, Lane Sum, Dangewarella, Tinan, Lane Tambonite, Tubare, Lane Sumbergi Yolaya, Narang Seul Dagrella, Tiniti Capsula, Chonchu Sentidamba. That's what you saw Jitu, Chonchu Sambatam Jitamni, Top Chong, Sambatabonaruchi.
We recite the vow 3 times, and now we've gone through the first and second repetition. At the end of this third repetition, I will snap my fingers. And at the time that I snap to my fingers, think to yourselves that in the presence of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, I have taken the vow of the Bodhisattva.
Chitaranganje,
Chitaranganje,
Dehiji,
Deshigi,
Chanchup Tutne,
Chanchu Tutne,
Jepatang,
Jepatang,
Chanchup Sembe,
Chanchu Sembe,
Hlapala,
Hlabala,
Deda Remigen,
Dedarimshin,
Nepatar,
Nepatar,
Dejindrola,
Deshindrola,
Pendento,
Pendendo,
Chanchup Semne,
Chanchu Semne,
Jejeshin,
Jegeshin,
Dejindun,
Deshindune,
Lapalang,
Hlabalang,
Rimbayendo,
Rimbashindu,
Laparaje,
Labargi.
Tatige, Jonchu Senja Dambate, Toparella, Tennis Susu, Raniso, Yunaruchi, Devozine.
So that completes the Bodhisattva vow. Now, please sit comfortably in your own places.
Tene, Tatijiso, Tene, Tanda, Tatige, Jonchu Senja, Nendro, Jamrota, Tene, Dambalemba Niti Sonare, Tasumba, Ji, Rangi Gawagambarella, Tene, Rangi Gawagambate, Tene, Tatanda, Rang, Pe, Jonchu Senja, Dambalenji Jumate. Kalvasam Puchumare. Tinti Junsin Karire Sena, Tenin Huma Sanji and Chanchu Samba Mambuga, Teneranking Katan Jachimbo Tubiwara. Titsawa Kanati Chumare Sena Konamba Tambo, Sonju to Tukini, Tiniti Sonju Sembe Lapala Zani, Devo Top de Ranking Katani, Linji to Patin de Chumare. Naranso Susuchi or Tamalpa, Tenin Korwig Neso, Nene. Tene ta tetabuge ranking teni drup matu parella te matu betsawa te kandi chungwa de sena ngaranso shonju senji damba le matu pa shonju chu de senji matu pa la teni chungwa de la tene tari ngaranso kalba sangbo chungne tombo mei luto tene tambi chu chu go la hyo tene tanda shonju senji damba lenji chungwa de tene sanji je kompon la kamba kampu pa nangi kamba kampu nipu sompu tene tatu kunde bola levgi yore la tene te gozu tupa te pe kalba zangbo chungore la tene te la gawa gamne tak yapu chung song somne tene mahon pa la kompertun chung ke chetla rangi gawa gawa rang gawa gawa re
And so in this way, we've had the preliminary part, which is the refuge vow, the actual vow, the actual practice taking the vow, and then there's the subsequent part, the later part, and that is meditating on joy. We have joy for ourselves, and we have joy for others. So first we meditate upon joy for ourselves. And the reason that we meditate upon joy for ourselves is that we are really extremely fortunate to be able to take the Bodhisattva vow. Why are we so fortunate? What is the reason for that? It is that in the past there are all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who have been able to bring vast benefits to themselves and all other sentient beings. And what is the root that this comes down to? The first thing that they did is they took the Bodhisattva vow. And then after taking the Bodhisattva vow, they were able to engage in the conduct, follow the training of the Bodhisattva. And through that training of the Bodhisattva, they were able to bring benefit to themselves and all their sentient beings. And so they have taken they took that first step. But we are ordinary sentient beings, and as ordinary sentient beings, we have just been staying in samsara. And as we wander in samsara, we have not really been able to benefit ourselves or others particularly much. And what does the root of that come down to? It comes down to the fact that we have not taken the vow of Bodhisattva, and because we haven't taken that, we haven't been able to put it into practice. And so here now we have attained this precious human body. We have entered the gate of the Dharma. Now we've taken the Bodhisattva vow. And so these are steps. If you take one step or two steps or three steps, each step we take takes us closer to the state of Buddhahood. And so we have begun here now by taking this Bodhisattva vow. We've embarked upon this journey. And so for that reason, we should have joy for ourselves. We should think to ourselves, this is really something very good that I've done. And this is, if we do this, then having taken it, it will really continue to grow and develop. And so that is why we have joy for ourselves. Now please repeat.
Tindu Datse, Drebuye, Meye Sitpa, Leparato, Terin Sanje, Rexuche, Sanje Seso, Tajurto, Tana Dagi, Jenny Jang, Rektan Tumbe, Letzamte, Jimmy Zumbe, Rendala, Noparaminjur, Tetaracha. 다 되게 랑가와 감바디 손니 다 니바디 예가와 감바레라 되네 예 탐지장 샘진 탐지 둥할레 잡아도 대화라 깨베 조 매바라고 용기와레라 되네 나랑기 종주주도 센지니 되네 렘지 살람 되데 다투 근데부터 버가서라 센지 탐지 둥할레 잡도 봐도 대화라 깨도 봐 용기와레라 되네 대답이 용기 처나 되네 센지 탐지라 지로동 둥할 매바 탐지 셈바 가와다 쪼아지 구레시네 다 되게 예가와 감바레.
And so that is joy for ourselves. And after we meditate on joy for ourselves, we meditate on joy for others. And the reason we meditate upon joy for others is that all other sentient beings, they do not have anyone to protect them from suffering. They do not have anyone who can bring them to happiness. But now at this time, I have generated bodhicitta. I have this beautiful mind of enlightenment, and as I then go through all the paths and levels and eventually come to the ultimate result of Buddhahood, I will be able to protect them from suffering. I will be able to bring them to suffering. And so for that reason, sentient beings no longer need to have any fear. And so they can be joyous and they can be excited about this. And so this is meditating on joy for others. Now please repeat again.
Dagi Tering, Chopa Tamchije, Jengharan Roa, Dehi Nidane, Pardo Della, Rando Pusenji, Ladan Lamen, Lasso Gawarachi, 다 대지에서 다 되게 정치 생기 담발렘바팅 흔로 의게 지섬지고네 트바래라 된 대지에서라 면람상보 따바래 된 생기되는 면람상보 따고바데 다 가리레세는 면람섬 따고 요래라 샘진 망보 정주주도 생기 마서바 다 된대 요래라 된 된조 된 정주지 생은 뭐지 질라 마지바 된조라 지브라효 som도 Tene manam nipa te shonchu kusan jila chi ne tene che nyampe ke nyenkayi ya patago ta tende yuwa rela. Tenzo manyam par hyo sambata. Tene manam samba te shonchu chu kusan chi tup te manyam par song tup na ya. Koni kong tu menpere jen yung kin ta tende yuwa rela. Tenzo koni kong tu per te tene tarzu sanji ji kompong to par hyo samba. Manam sumbo te tabge rela. Manam sumbo te ji du nang ne sanji tay ne te tabge manam jab nang ro chi.
And so our bodhisattva vow has the preliminaries, it has the actual vow, and it has the what does it follow up? The subsequent part. And then after we have completed all three of these, then we now make an aspiration. And this aspiration is that in our mind we make the good aspiration. We make three aspirations. The first of these is that there are many sentient beings who have not yet been able to generate bodhicitta, who have not been able to do that. And so we make the prayer that they may be able to generate bodhicitta. Then secondly, there are many, even if they have, the second prayer is that even if they have generated bodhicitta, there's the danger that it might weaken. And so we make the prayer that their bodhicitta may never weaken. The third prayer is that there are some people who have generated bodhicitta and whose bodhicitta has not weakened, and yet there's a possibility that it might not grow and develop. And so here we make the prayer that their bodhicitta may grow and develop until they attain the ultimate result. And so these are the three prayers. May bodhicitta, great and precious, arise where it has not arisen. Where it's arisen without weakening, may it grow ever more and more. And so please repeat these words after Rinpoche and keep this prayer in your mind.
Changchup semne Rinpoche Machipa nam Jejurje Jepa nyamba Mepa tang Kane kondo Pelwara hyo Ta tige changchu senji dambate Pultupari alatini Tanda namjing ngoa to manam narochi.
That completes the Bodhisattva vow, and now that we've finished that, we will recite the usual dedications and aspiration prayers. Chöpa Sunande tamje sebani tonenye beranam panjene gegana chibarla chubai sibe tsole rowa rowa sho